leaders. And while they're exiting, would you turn in your Bibles to 1 Samuel 19. David's on the run. Saul's after him. He's trying to kill him. And so I've entitled this Our Shield and Defender because it's interesting how God protected David in this chapter and how God will indeed keep us. So pick up verse 1 again, 1 Samuel 19. We'll read through the chapter. Saul told his son Jonathan and all the attendants to kill David. But Jonathan was very fond of David and warned him, "My father Saul is looking for a chance to kill you. Be on your guard tomorrow morning. Go into hiding and stay there. I will go out and stand with my father in the field where you are. I'll speak to him about you and will tell you what I find out." And Jonathan spoke well of David to Saul his father and said to him, "Let not the king do wrong to his servant David. He has not wronged you, and what he has done has benefited you greatly. He took his life in his own hands when he killed the Philistine. The Lord won a great victory for all Israel, and you saw it and were glad. Why then would you do to an innocent man like David by killing him?" Saul listened to Jonathan and took this oath. "As surely as the Lord lives, David will not be put to death." So Jonathan called David and told him the whole conversation. He brought him to Saul, and David was with Saul as before. Once more, war broke out, and David went out and fought the Philistines. He struck them with such force that they fled before him. But an evil spirit from the Lord came upon Saul as he was sitting in his house with his spear in his hand. While David was playing the harp, Saul tried to pin him to the wall with his spear. But David eluded him as Saul drove the spear into the wall. That night, David made good his escape. Saul sent men to David's house to watch it and to kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, "If you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you'll be killed." So Michal let David down through a window, and he fled and escaped. Then Michal took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment, and putting some goat's hair at the head. Made it look like he was sleeping. Then Saul sent the men to capture David. When Saul sent the men to capture David, Michal said, "He is ill." Then Saul sent the men back to see David and told them, "Bring him up to me in his bed so that I might kill him." But when the men entered, there was the idol in the bed, and at the head was some goat's hair. Saul said to Michal, "Why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped?" Michal, here's lie number 2, "He said to me, 'Let me get away. Why should I kill you?'" And when David had fled and made his escape, he went to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And then he and Samuel went to Naioth and stayed there. Word came to Saul, "David is in Naioth at Ramah." So he sent men to capture him. But when they saw a group of prophets prophesying with Samuel standing there as their leader, the Spirit of God came upon Saul's men, and they also prophesied. And Saul was told about it, and he sent more men, and they prophesied too. And then Saul sent a third time, and they also prophesied. Finally, he himself left for Ramah and went to the great cistern of Secu. And he asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" "Over in Naioth at Ramah," they said. So Saul went to Naioth at Ramah, but the Spirit of God came even upon him. And he walked along prophesying until he came to Naioth. He stripped off his robes and also prophesied in Samuel's presence. He lay that way all that day and night. And this is why the people say, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" Charles Spurgeon said this, "God has promised to keep his people, and he will keep his promise." Very simple and well put. And that's the lesson I would like for us to learn today or take home with us. It is, though, more a rule of thumb because many Christians have suffered even to the point of death. We know that. But I would like to talk about this in our day-to-day lives, in our daily conflicts, I believe strongly that we should let God fight our fights. Now, let me give you an illustration of what I'm talking about. You might say, well, that's no big deal there. But it was to me. Okay. A couple of years ago, I shared with you how one of the business owners in town came up to me and told me that I had said some negative things about his business. And I remember looking at him in total surprise. Like, what? And he said this in his place of business, so other people heard it. And I thought, man, oh man, for the life of me, I hadn't even entertained the thought. I was pretty sure anyway. And I've always tried to be safe and above board in a small town, though I began to wonder, how in the world did this rumor get started? You know, finally, after much thought, I went back to a situation where I was having a conversation. Somebody must have been eavesdropping and misinterpreted or misheard or something, and it began to spread that I was saying negative things about the business. And it really bothered me because my reputation as a Christian and as a pastor was at stake. This guy was connected, and those who spread it around were also connected. And I also cared about the guy because we had at least a relationship that was fairly friendly, and he knew where I stood. You know, maybe in comparison to what other people go through, this is nothing. But I take my representation of Christ seriously. It's our representation that is our witness. And heaven and hell are at stake. So what did I do? I did nothing. I did nothing. I didn't go around saying, hey, could you stop this? Could you go talk to so-and-so? I didn't do anything. I believed that God in his own time would take care of it. If I just stayed the course and let my life speak for itself, somehow things would be resolved. What I learned that day is there was another side to this guy that I didn't know about. In time, many others saw the other side as well, and his credibility waned. So God took care of it. He smoothed it out. We will face difficulties like this at school, with fellow students, in the workplace, with family, and in our community. General rule is, let God be our protector. Saul was after David, and God kept David. And God first used people. And by the way, God may therefore use us. And we'll get to some practical application in a little bit. God first used Jonathan, and then Michal, who is David's wife. And by the way, you notice David didn't seek out their help. They chose to help themselves. Saul commanded Jonathan to kill David. And for sure, Saul didn't want David to outshine him, but it may be, even though he's been rejected, that he's somehow holding out hope that Jonathan can succeed him and be on the throne. But Jonathan knew better. Jonathan, in the former chapter, had pledged his allegiance to David, and he made a covenant. So in keeping with his promise, Jonathan went behind Saul's back and disobeyed him. He warned David of Saul's intent, and he created a plan. David was to hide out, and I guess it was within eyeshot of the meeting that he was going to have with Saul, and then Jonathan would report back to David as to what Saul said. Saul promises not to kill David, but the promise is short-lived. We don't know how much time elapsed, but Saul set out again to kill David, and the first attempt was, again, he threw this spear at him, hoping that he would run him through and pin him to the wall. David eludes it, and he runs to his house, and we see then next Michal, his wife, protecting him. Knowing of the plan, she lets David down out of a window. Imagine there was a wall there, being a walled building, or a city. And then she takes this idol, which is kind of interesting because you go, well, aren't these people believers? What are they doing with idols in their hand? The word there is teraphim, and the last time we hear about it, I'm pretty sure at least one other time that we hear about it is in Genesis when Rachel stole the household idols from Laban and kept him in the pack there on her animal. Well, anyway, she takes this teraphim, this idol, whatever it is, and she makes it look like David's in bed sleeping. So when the people come up, she says, well, you can't bother him now. He's sick. Well, then, the word gets back to Saul, and he says, well, let's prove it, so I want you to bring him down to me. And she then tells another lie. Now, if you follow Michal, her faith was probably weak at best. Maybe she's coming to faith through David. We just don't know where it's totally at, in Old Testament. Unless it's very clear. We know she was a bit of an opportunist, in later days. So anyway, God still uses her to protect David. And there's a lesson here for you and me. Not that we're to have our idols, okay? But God's people need to care for the marginalized and the innocent. They need to be protected. Now, when we get to application here, I want to tell you that I like to keep sermons nice and tight. You may wonder about that, but I do. I like to keep the main idea, and I'm going to take us a little bit off on a bunny trail here, but it's somehow connected. Both Jonathan and Michal did what was wrong, right? To protect life. Jonathan disobeyed his father's authority, and Michal lied. And both of them risked their lives in so doing. This isn't the only incident in Scripture where people lied to protect life. You think about the midwives there in the book of Exodus. Why are these babies being born? Well, these Hebrew women are so hardy, they give birth before we can even get there. And they preserved life. Or you got Rahab, the harlot, keeping the spies and then letting them go and lying. And by the way, she's commended for her act in the New Testament. So the question is, and you don't have to come up with a conclusion, or maybe you already do and you disagree, and that's fine. But let's put our thinking hats on a little bit. The question is, are there times where falsehood or disobedience is justified? You think about times of war. Many Christians were told to lie, to mislead what? The enemy, so that an invasion could take place. Or you think about Corrie ten Boom in Holland. Can you imagine growing up there in Amsterdam or Holland, and all of a sudden these Nazis come in, and your whole life is turned upside down. And they want you to turn in Jews, and they decided as Christians that they would harbor Jews and protect them. And so the family, yes, lied when the authorities would come to their Corey's sister had an interesting twist on that. She said, well, maybe we shouldn't lie. Maybe we should tell the truth and just believe then that God's going to protect these people. And one time it happened. One time, and so Corey was wondering, well, maybe my sister's got something. But for the most part, the family disagreed. It was appropriate to lie to protect life. So could we ever be in the place, I don't know how, where we, quote, do the wrong when the wrong thing becomes the right thing? You say, Lair, where are you going? We believe in moral absolutes. So do I. So do I. We live in a day of relativism, and I believe in moral absolutes. But what happens when you're caught between two? One absolute is tell the truth. The other absolute, preserve life. What do? One absolute, obey authority. Romans 13 is pretty clear. Next absolute, preserve life. What have you caught between these two? We've seen it in our lifetime, at least my lifetime. You go back to the civil rights movement, when Martin Luther King Jr. adopted Gandhi's idea of civil disobedience, that you disobey government for a higher cause. And they did a great thing. Later in my lifetime, we had the fight to preserve life. And Christians took different positions, but there were those who believed they could civilly disobey government to protect life because life was the higher one. They were caught between two, so I will choose this one. I had to think about that a lot, and I believed that that probably was not the best way, but I was going to accept those who did believe that way. And God used those Christians to bring an awareness to our nation. Who knows how many people were protected and preserved? Human life is sacred. There are many situations where lying is wrong, so I'm not giving us liberty here to go out and lie in any tough spot. I got a chip in my windshield, and I had to get it fixed, so I took it into the guy, and he got right on it, and wow, they put that, looks like a suction cup, but they put that glue in there and everything. They patched it up. And then he said, now we got to call the insurance company because they'll just pay for it. There's no deductible or anything. So he's talking to my insurance company, and I should say before he called the insurance company, he said, now they're going to ask you this question, Lair. They're going to say, has the work already been done? And you're to say no. But the work had been done. And I said, look, do you really want me to lie to the insurance company? I know it's not that big a deal, but I'm not too comfortable with it. So anyway, he said, well, I fixed the windshield that way to make sure that it would hold. Otherwise, you're probably going to need in the future a windshield. So when I give the phone over to you and she asks you, is the windshield already fixed? You just say no. And so I thought, oh man, this is a drag. Guess what? The woman never asked me. She never asked me. And I got off the phone and I said, she never asked me that question. He goes, well, I lied for you, he said. Where am I? Oh. We're not to lie in a court of law. We can't lie at work to protect ourselves or someone else. But there are those, I think, rare occasions when it may be justified. Now let's get back on track to the big idea that God will be our protector. In the second part of this chapter, we see God intervening directly. David goes to Samuel and Ramah for protection, and the two of them go to Naot. And we're pretty sure that Naot is just an area of dwelling places within Ramah or just outside Ramah, where the prophets hung out and prophesied. So Saul sends these guys up to Ramah and Naot, and what happens? God has these guys break out in prophecy. And so they're pretty much rendered unable to do anything. And he sends men 3 times to do this. 3 times to do this. Each time they break out in prophecy and are unable to take hold of David. And so Saul then decides to go up there himself. And then he too is placed out of commission. In fact, God levels him here. He strips him down. He lays naked on the ground, babbling away all that day and night so that David could get away. Now here's the irony of the story. The first time Saul received the Spirit, he prophesied. That's chapter 10. It was at his coronation. And it was there that he was the beneficiary of this. Here the Spirit comes upon him to disgrace him. He was rendered powerless. So he laid there day and night, that day and night, so David could escape. And there's this saying, and you find it again in chapter 10. Is Saul also among the prophets? The first time it was said in a positive way. Here it's said in jest. So we come back to the main point. Let's let God fight our fights. I thought of different places this could be applied to, and it's just about anywhere. So I will apply it in general and let you apply it specifically. By the way, someone told me, he says, if you speak to 200 people, you will deliver 200 sermons. Because we all go home and apply it to our own way, right? So I've always believed apply in general, let people apply it to their lives specifically. When we try to be the fixer, we can often make things worse. So let God be the fixer. He's bigger than our problems. One place I thought about was this. I thought about the public school system. So I called up my daughter, Lauren. And she then, or I didn't call her, I texted her. Then she FaceTimed me back. And I know why. She was on the beach in Mexico, toughing it out. I didn't know she was there. But anyway, she got back to me in time to help me. And I said, Lauren, what was it like for you to be in public school during your high school years? Because at one point, she wanted to go to a private Christian college, and we decided against that. And one of the reasons was you need to see what's wrong and what's right and make your choice. Make your choice. But did you feel any pressure from others? You know, did you feel discriminated against? Did you feel looked down upon? Did you feel weird? Being a nonconformist, or especially a PK. I used to ask my kids often, how do you feel being a preacher's kid? I mean, do you feel any pressure on you to perform or whatever? They go, huh? No. And I was very, very happy. And she said she feels it more when she's at work than she did in high school. In high school, she kept friends more like herself. They weren't necessarily Christians, but they were good people with her moral standards and so forth. And so there were sort of these accepted boundaries, if you will, within the high school. At work, however, and part of her work is waitressing at this fancy place in Red Wing. She's been there a number of years. She says, it's really kind of difficult because my boss is rather intolerant of anybody who believes differently, their political views or their morals and their ethics. And she said she's got a clique. And they're her groupies, if you will, you know, who follow her. And she said, I just have to keep my mouth shut and work. Because if she began to not like me, then she would give me far less hours and so forth. So she says, I hold my cards close to my chest. She's a good poker player. And so far, so good. God's been looking out for her. I think she speaks for a lot of people. In fact, I was telling this story Thursday night to a woman I know, and she said, well, that's me. That's me every day at work. And I said, really? She said, because there's only a few people at work at the same time. And she said, she doesn't witness to people, you know, she doesn't go off and talk to them or argue them, you know, but on various ethical issues. She just keeps her mouth quiet, but they kind of know where she is as a Christian. And she says, I've actually caught them backing off in the hallway and talking. About who? About me. About me. Interesting thing. So every day she just goes through this and bears it. But she says, somebody behind my back must have gone to the person over my boss and said something. Interesting, huh? Yeah, that God is taking care of it. I know a man whose job was on the line. Guess what? He lost it. But he got a better one. He got a better one. So are we willing to let God fight our fights? Someone asked me if this is a true story, and it is. It was written up in the newspaper, 1995, but there was this guy who was a welder, and he worked on these water tanks, you know, that rise way up, and he's on a scaffolding, and he had to release his safety gear to reattach it, and he was going to grab onto these pipes. At the exact same time, some cage fell, knocked the scaffolding or wiggled it, and he lost his balance and fell. And he fell 100 feet face down in a pile of dirt. And they called 911, and when the paramedics got there, they found him walking around just kind of holding his back. You know, so they put him out on a stretcher, and they carried him away. And he said, by the way, don't drop me. You have to find out all he had was a bruised lung. That's it. So you think, well, gosh, this guy's fallen 100 feet and survived that. What's he so afraid of falling 3 feet off of a stretcher? But it ain't like the Christian life. God has saved us. He's promised to keep us for all eternity. So don't you think he can keep us week to week? Let's pray. Father, thank you for the Old Testament, the stories, and how rich they are because they're your stories. How you have been working with your people, like us, for all time in your salvation story. So help us to take to heart whatever we can this day, add it to our lives. We pray in Jesus. Amen.